Recite. Dobar večer svima. Dobrodošli u Urani, u prostor kreacije. Krećemo sa projektom Arhitektura Urani. To će biti serija predavanja i razgovora, trenutno online, sa kreativcima iz različitih područja, koji će govoriti o prostoru koji nas okružuje. Ja ću sad prijeći na engleski, zato što je ovo internacionalni projekt. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Urania Space of Creation. Urania is envisioned as a home for creative expression, especially for the one who questions oneself, society, and the world. After a lot of different events that we have so far, we are starting with the program Architecture at Urania. It is going to be a series of lectures and talks currently online with creative people from different fields who are going to talk about a space and society. First of many lectures we will have from Fabrizio Gallanti. Fabrizio Gallanti is a curator and architect with experience in architectural design, education, publication, and exhibitions. He's the director of Alcanrave Centre d'Architecture in Bordeaux. He holds a PhD in architectural design from the Politecnico di Torino and a Master of Architecture from the University of Genoa. He was the first senior Mellon Fellow at Princeton University. And since 2014, he's a visiting professor at the Architectural Association in London with a master in history and critical thinking. In 2003, together with Francisca Insulza, Gallanti founded the Montreal-based architectural research studio FIG Projects, which curated international exhibitions such as The World in Our Eyes for the Lisbon Architectural Triennale, and edited journals such as Harvard Design Magazine with the title No Suite in 2018. FIG was founded in 2003 in Santiago de Chile, and FIG projects explore the boundaries between architecture, urban research, visual arts, and promotes interdisciplinary initiatives. Wide-ranging in nature, their practice extends from architectural exploration, urban studies, writing, curatorial projects, and its work has been exhibited in different venues, and in Chile, in Sao Paulo, Graz, Architecture and Urbanism Biennale in Shenzhen, Canadian Centre for Architecture in Montreal, Venice Architectural Biennale, Storefront Gallery for Art and Architecture, and so on. Of course, also the work was published in books, and international magazines as Domus, A+U, and Harvard Design Magazine. So now you can learn about it from the founder, as he will give his lecture titled Hunter-Gatherer, FIG Projects and the Wonderful World of Web. If you have any questions for Fabrizio, please ask on Facebook on the comment section. And Fabrizio, floor is yours, or better, internet is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here with you, although virtually from Montreal, Canada, where I'm currently based. Like anyone else, I think that many of us are at home with this new condition of work and private life together. So there might be some voices in the background because all my family is at home working and studying. So I apologize for that. So when I was approached by Urania, we had a little bit of exchange about what could have been the topic of the conversation. Also based on a series of articles that have been actually issuing through a Croatian vector, that is the Oris magazine. But then we kind of agreed that it could have been interesting somehow to touch on a particular facet of the activity of the projects, that is our somehow involvement with a series of digital media that allow architecture to be communicated. As it has been pointed out in the introduction, FIG Project is a kind of ambiguous entity. It's a couple, Francisca and myself, that we're also family. And we've been always working somehow around architecture. So we tried in the past to become a real architecture studio, like the many that you might know, especially in Chile. As Rem Koolhaas puts it, architecture is very much about coincidences and events that sometimes are out of your control. So now, since several years, we are more operating in a field that we could call research / edition / curatorial, we see architecture rather as a very intriguing field of knowledge, and we operate therefore in the dissemination, critical understanding, and debate around that knowledge. So for today, I prepared a PowerPoint that is mostly dedicated to what we call hunting and gathering. That is exactly the activity of navigating a strange world between analogic and digital, trying to retrieve architectural intelligence and remanipulating through different media, offering that to the kind of, let's say, wider landscape of the public or the audiences that can be somehow approached through the tools that we use. So allow me to try to share my screen. I think it works. So you should be seeing a PowerPoint page. Is that functioning? Can someone from Urania say me that it's visible?
Okay, and the other question, I think.
Okay, so if I don't hear anyone, I assume that you're seeing a large white page. So hunter-gatherer, it's a very common term in anthropology or archaeology or paleontology that describe the very early humans on the planet, and where they were trying to find their sustenance through somehow exploring the landscape and the territory around them and finding resources for nourishment in what was available. So either hunting for animals or recovering plants and mushrooms and other source of nourishment. And in a certain way, this is how we look around us. We observe what happens around us with the intention, yes, of hunting, therefore getting out of our cave to look for things specifically that we know could be available for us, or gathering in a certain way, being able to be exposed to content and therefore like taking it and through a series of manipulation converted it into something else. So basically, we do that online mostly, and the way we translate what we find is again mostly through different online tools, websites, and other social media. But we would like here somehow to underline which are the references and which are the sources of inspiration for such actions. So one is, of course, Walter Benjamin, the philosopher, the German philosopher, that for us is always a reference, especially in his work as an acute observer of the reality that was around him, and in particular his unfinished project of the Arcade in Paris. As you might know, it was a book, an unaccomplished and unfinished book, where Benjamin, by observing a very physical and architectural phenomenon, the shopping arcades in Paris, was trying to use them as a kind of playground or territory with which to explore far wider and more complex ideas about contemporary society, capitalism, the condition of modernity. And what for us has always been fascinating is somehow the protocol and the model that Benjamin was using in his work, that was really a composition of fragments, an assemblage of collage components, a narrative that was not linear, and that was always like incorporating direct observation, quotes from books. And as you see here in the annotation and notes that he was somehow using to organize the material while he was preparing this work, there is a lot of somehow ways of operating that anticipate very much what now we know as an hypertext or as a website, in the sense that there are references that you can recognize in these kind of visual scribbles and visual annotation that were helpful for Benjamin himself to navigate inside a very gigantic archive of material. The other reference that is somehow parallel, also in chronological terms, to that quest by Benjamin, that was mostly literary, mostly through text, is the very famous that again was anticipating very much what now we do with the tools of the internet or the tools of computer, really to try to establish analogies, similarities, possibility to intersect different visual material. That here you see in the original composition of these panels, where different sources from books, from reproduction, from picture were assembled with the goals to constitute a narrative that was very much capable of navigating between heterogeneous material. And for us, the third reference that is very important in our work is this idea of taxonomy. This idea that no matter what is the object that you observe, that can be very noble, or as in the case of the books by Atelier Bauau, is very banal. On the left, you have the hybrid buildings that are to be found in Tokyo, so buildings where you have the more incredible programs mixed together. And on the right, you have the pet buildings, therefore buildings that occupy very small plots of land. No matter what is the content that you deal with, interesting to apply a certain rigor and a certain filter, and by taxonomy, therefore, we identify of somehow index, a system of organizing material, an idea of a certain regularity and obsession. That is very much what somehow motivates and agitates the way that we do operate. So, Field Project occupies a space that is between our website. We'll talk about that a little bit later, where we basically present all the things that we do, and I will try later to explain what I mean by that. And a certain kind of daily, quotidian action and activity through social media, primarily Facebook, and we'll try to explain why. But in a certain way that corresponds to interest, strategy, and tendency that are a little bit older than the current scenario of digital communication. So we've been in different capacities, individually or as a collective, participating or collaborating to multiple projects of somehow dissemination of culture and knowledge through the internet. And therefore, what we do now is somehow a consequence of this trajectory that by now is even longer than 20 years. The first collaboration that I would like to bring to your attention is this website that was created and prepared for the Documenta 10, the very important art exhibition that occurs every 5 years. So one can say it's a 5 Biennale or a Pentennale in Kassel in Germany. And in that case, a collective of early cyber artists, internet agitators, activists, hackers, somehow gathered by the names that you see on the top, Philipp Pocock, Florian Wenz, Udo Noll, and Felix Huber, created a website that was meant to follow their exploration of the equator, so literally the line that circles the planet, with a very innovative interface composed of an HTML code that allow for small snippets of video, text, fragments to be uploaded on the website. And it was a way somehow for us to be engaged in the sense that it operated as a sort of open source coding that allowed multiple authors to upload material. And I was one of the contributors that started to somehow add to the original story more content. That same collective later on generated another project, even more ambitious, called Humboldt, that was financed by the different German institutions to celebrate an anniversary of the exploration by Alexander von Humboldt, the great explorer in Latin America. And again, here we started to collaborate not only on the production of content. You see this very crude and simple interface in 97. 97, we can get back to that. Connection was still by modem. The weight of the information that was to be channeled through internet connection had to be very light, otherwise the cost of your phone bill would have exploded. And so on one end, there was again a website that was trying to constitute a sort of travelogue or a travel diary through the internet. But in that case, the involvement was through a different entity called Group A12, a collective of architects and designers from Italy, where we were challenged to provide a kind of like a physical environment where this website was going to be presented to the audience. This is in an exhibition called Net Condition in 97 at the ZKM in Karlsruhe. It was the first exhibition in the world dedicated to internet art. And we created this kind of gigantic platform of pallets, recycled material, used furniture to allow for the audience to access the website. Again, now for many of us, maybe this seems a little bizarre. What is the reason why to create such a space? But again, you have to consider that to have an internet connection back then, more than 20 years ago, was not something so simple. So you needed to have a certain amount of money, a certain capacity. So the possibility to have a place where to access a website in a physical space was very important back then. And not much later, again, Gruppo A12, we launched this project for the Venice Biennale. We were invited by the then curator to create, to participate to the Venice Biennale. And what we thought was that we were way too young and inexperienced, and also with not too much to show ourselves. So we thought, why don't we create an open archive of all the words that are used to describe the transformation of the city, and to present that website instead. So here what you see is the interface. It's still online, and it's still possible to access it. It's pre-Wikipedia. We're very proud about that, in the sense that it allows for a multiplicity of authors to upload material. And it really operated as a sort of dictionary, dynamic, because it was constantly uploaded, that tried to follow the reality of architecture, of urbanism, of planning, through the lens of the language that is used to describe the city. This is one of the texts that accompanied the interface. It was very, again, the software, the system that was used was very simple. And in a certain way, it anticipates much of the activity that now we do as FIG. I think it's important somehow to consider that even if now everything that surrounds us, the possibility to access information through a cell phone, the ease of access of internet archives, the navigation in the real world that is more and more supported by digital means like maps of Google in your telephone, or any sort of kind of virtual reality environment, is a little bit older than what we tend to remember. And again, I think that one model that is very important to us is the model of the blog, that probably has been somehow waning out of attention in the past years. The idea that the possibility that the internet offers to one is to circumnavigate all the limitation of publishing, in the sense that if you have something to say, you say it, and you put it online very quickly, and you are capable of reaching different audiences. So here what you see on your left, on the left of your screen, is for us a reference. So one of the earliest architectural blog, again still online, very much intrigued for the openness of its contents and the attitude. And on the right, a blog that again is still online, that works as a sort of archive of all the contemporary artists that have been working inspired by modern architects. And it's a kind of ongoing project that now is 12 years old, that document about this possibility to really see the internet not only as a place where you find things, but also as a place where you can deposit things, as a kind of archive that is immaterial, that has no space, where you can really use it to progressively accumulate information, idea, and content that you produce without having to pass through, we can get it back to that concept a little bit later, through the very complicated system of selection that used to exist before the internet occurred. But in fact, let's try to make a little bit of history. I think history is cool. And here what you see is an attempt to list all the very important transformation that surround us. So the life that we conduct is based on these new tools of work. So let me read quickly through this list. 1957, the first scanner. What you see in blue are inventions that are very close to architecture. 1964, the first AutoCAD system. 66, the first chatbot. 67, the first hypertext. 67, again, the first ATM where you can get money from a machine. 73, the first mouse. 73, GPS. 75, ARPANET, that, as you know, was a military system that predated the internet. 75, the first commercial laptop by IBM. 78, the bulletin board system, a system of communicating through the internet through text. 80, Usenet. 82, AutoCAD. 82, the compact disc. 82, the first commercial cell phone. 82, the first Apple. 82, CATIA, or a very important software for modeling architecture. 83, Dynix, the first online library. 83, Ethernet. 86, 3D System Corporation, the first 3D printed. 88, the first camera with Nikon. 88, Photoshop. 89, World Wide Web as we know it. 1990, Microsoft Windows. 1991, Linux. 1992, JPG. 1992, SMS. 1992, the first system of automatic trading online. 1992, QuickTime. 1993, PDF. 1993, HTML. 1993, MPG. 1994, MP3. 1994, Amazon. 1994, the first version of Rhino. 1994, the first Sony PlayStation. 1994, the first Netscape Navigator. 1994, the first blog. 1995, eBay is launched on the internet. 1995, Internet Explorer is launched. 1995, the first movie entirely filmed in CGI, Toy Story. 1996, Genicam, the first pornographic cam site. 1996, DVD. 1996, USB. 1996, Flash Player. 1996, Outlook. 1997, Netflix. 1997, Wi-Fi. 1997, Revit. 1998, Google. 1998, 4G LTE that allows finally a cell phone to carry video and text in a far more intense way. 1999, Napster. 1999, BlackBerry. 2000, the 2K bug. You remember when we were all terrified that the world was going to collapse because no one had thought that there needed to be more than 2 zeros in the software of our computers. 2001, Wikipedia, iPod, iTunes. 2002, the dot-com bubble, LinkedIn, FaceMash. That was the website before Facebook. 2003, Skype, WordPress, Apple Safari. 2004, MindGeek, Google, Flickr, Gmail, Nintendo, YouTube, Google Maps. 2006, Facebook and Twitter, Zine, Nintendo. And probably the most important milestone has been the iPhone in 2007, the moment where the technology of the internet becomes handheld and you can carry internet in your pocket. 2007, Tumblr, Platform Architettura, streaming on Netflix, Amazon Kindle, the bankers were Lehman Brothers, Grasshopper, Android. 2008, ArcDaily, Airbnb, Dropbox, Spotify, UberCab, WeTransfer, Grindr, Bitcoin, Siri, Instagram, Pinterest, iPad, Snapchat, Gangnam Style, that is the first YouTube video to make 1 billion views, Tinder, Zoom, Oculus, Google Glass, Alexa, the beginning of the decline of the sales of ebooks of 2015, Pokemon Go, AlphaGo is the first computer to win a match of Go against a human. Apple is the first company in 2009 to be valued at $1 trillion US, and in 2020 is the first company in the world to be valued at $2 trillion US. So all that list that has been created by us for a website and a lecture has been constantly evolving, and as a way to confirm this kind of interesting idea for us of the somehow continuity between the analog and the digital, after we issued that list, we were approached by Das Magazine, that is one of the the oldest cultural magazine in German, published in Switzerland, to see if it was possible to print the same list on paper. And here you see a kind of updated version of that same list of all the transformation that has really modified the world around us. You know, the moment where the digital and the analogic start to intertwine. As you see, the list gets a little bit back in time, a little bit more than what I just presented to you. And there are far more things that we discovered in the meantime. The surge of Hotmail, the invention of tools like webcams, other apparatuses that really allow us to live in this kind of like novel landscape where digital and analogic are in a kind of continuous system. So I'm trying to somehow anticipate what I will be telling later. So if you have any chance now, just quickly to check on Google or on Facebook, you have noticed that Fig project exists online. And the way we do exist online is based on a series of concepts. And it's very interesting for us to realize how most of the concepts that we were using or that we use are somehow all of them to be found in this book. Or somehow this book like echoes many of our concerns. It is a book mainly about the music industry. So it is a book mainly about the obsession with the use the recent past as a permanent source of inspiration. Samuel Reynolds is a very sophisticated music critic, and in this book he agitates and he presents a series of very interesting concepts that are, even if applied to music production, can be extrapolated and used to observe in general any cultural production today. And it's also very interesting to know that in the book there are numerous references to other fields of activity, cinema and architecture as well, proving that there is now also kind of continuous flow between practices. And this is also something that we're very interested as Fig. These are the main concepts that somehow underline our approach. One is that we live in an era of some archive fever. This is kind of established by the French philosopher Jacques Derrida, so the dematerialization of the archive that has become impossible because of the digital has somehow brought us to really exist in a kind of permanent mood of obsessive attention to archives. The second concept is that the tools that we use every day in our life, the laptop, the desktop, the cell phone, the tablet, are really modifying the way we are giving attention to things. And therefore, we always are acting in a system of continual partial attention. This idea of multitasking, this idea that our concentration is always distracted, always like absorbed by things that are not necessarily at the focus. The third aspect is all these authors are all that are listed here are philosopher, sociologists, critical thinkers. The third concept is the memory epidemics. The fact that more and more the possibility that are offered by new technology make us believe that every single piece, fragments and bits of production will be stored, and therefore it will be possible to recall every single element of the past. Simon Reynolds himself has a series of very interesting sentences or concepts. One that the old archives or the old collection of the analogic time had always to find an equilibrium with space and money and objects. So if you were a library or if you were a record collection, the quantity of money that you had to spend for renting a space or for having shelves was somehow determining what was going to be kept. While now the sensation that everything is spaceless, weightless, and moneyless means that we live in an era of infinite storage, that every single small stupid video that has been produced on any television now can be accessible. On the other hand, Simon Reynolds himself, talking about YouTube, is somehow highlighting the fact that this possibility of infinite storage means that we're less and less in front of archives that are organized, structured, and curated and controlled, but really like a kind of basement of jumbled attic that is very like somehow chaotically controlled. The other concept that for us is important is the idea of Walter Benjamin of the peripheral vision, that in the experience of the metropolis, the things that happen to be at the periphery of your eyes are very, very important to have an overall sense of reality. Coming back to Reynolds, and this is very important for us, the idea that on the internet, past and present are exactly the same thing. There is no more the possibility or the chance to discern clearly between different historical elements. Everything is simultaneous. The concept number 8 that is very interesting for us is TLDR. That is a sort of like a meme that appeared in 2003. Too long, don't read. Text seems to be suffering more and more because of this continual partial attention, from the fact that we're not giving too much attention to text, and so visual is becoming more important. And the very last important concept for us is that the past don't exist anymore. We live in a sort of everlasting present. And this is a good example of this everlasting present. This is 2 covers of the kind of cult architecture magazine San Rocco that some of you might know, kind of like not-for-profit initiative launched between Italy and Belgium almost 10 years ago. And the way these 2 historical antecedents are treated graphically in the cover of the magazine. So on the left, probably a Gothic church. On the right, an early project by by Toyo Ito, is the proof that to the eyes of the editors of San Rocco, the past and the present, the something of several centuries ago and something of today somehow play exactly the same role in the constitution of a system of architectural references. And the other element that is very important, coming back to what Simon Reynolds was saying, is exactly the possibility of this endless storage, the possibility of accessing a gigantic and infinite system of archive that is augmented every single day by fans, by people that do that pro bono, is quite well embedded in this page from Spotify, where you can listen to more than 1,000 songs that over the years have been selected by Tom York, one of the band leader of Radiohead, when he is doing himself a job of playlisting and curating and DJing and selecting music. And this is a kind of interesting example of this possibility of working as a cultural agent through the operation and the action of selection. Selection that can be, on one end, bringing to 1,000 elements, because it's exactly based on this kind of infinite capacity and possibility of instant access to knowledge. So now I will try to explain maybe a little bit better what we do as FIG. So I try to illustrate the antecedents, the kind of early incursion in the digital world that we did through different formation in the past, which are the concepts that we try to agitate. And as FIG, we do two things. One thing is to produce project concepts, to curate, to research and to work, and all that goes into the website that was also used as an illustration for today's lecture. That is a very simple WordPress interface where we simply upload chronologically what we do. And we tend to publish everything that we do, in particular and especially the projects that don't work. So any participation to a call for papers or a call for curatorial proposal or anything that is not yet a project also is published by us, because we think that it's a good way to mobilize ideas, because especially in the work that we do, that is of, let's say, curatorship, editorial, there are not really ideas of which we can claim to be the only proprietors. But it's rather the idea that we should like generate dialogues throughout our proposals. So here you will find a kind of miscellaneous sequence of projects between 2003 and now. And what you call noise is mainly channeled through our Facebook page, is the idea to share, literally, to use that term that is very generous in a way, to share with people the things that we bump into, that we encounter, or that we look for, that are interesting to us. Really, the idea is coming back to the blog. The idea of the early blogs was to provide a kind of like a generous sharing of information, of knowledge, of ideas with the audience. And in the way we deal with the Facebook page, we try to reincarnate this ideological approach of the early blogs. For any of you that has been frequenting blogs back in the day, you might remember that very often there was a column on the right of any page called blog roll, where any blog manager or author would have put links to other websites that were considered as friends, allies, somehow collaborators. And that was a very generous action, because whenever you were going to click to one of these links, you would have abandoned the original blog and you had gone somewhere else. And in a certain way, we do mobilize Facebook with a similar spirit. So it's just a depository where we tend, possibly at least once per day, to upload a project, a book, a movie, a lecture, an exhibition, a conference, the contribution from another artist that in that moment is somehow entering into our radar. Sometimes it's proposed by someone, sometimes you bump into by accident, and we simply would like to show other people, and people are following us probably because of that, which are the things that interest us. And the method that we used to be hunting and gathering the wonderful world of the web, and then to transform that into cultural content that is simply put out by Facebook, is summarizing these three images. So for us, there is no real distinction between the analogic and the digital. They're exactly the same. The way we explore the digital is very much inspired by the fact that we grew up when the analogic was dominant. So we adopt the same sort of serendipitous system of exploration that one had to learn when we were frequenting libraries and moving our fingers into index card. What is interesting to us is a concept developed by Gilles Deleuze, the philosopher that you have in the center, in his series of video called Abécédaire, where he's exploring themes and topics in alphabetical order. The first entry is animal, and in particular is very interested by one animal, the tick, because the tick is an animal that stays on a blade of grass, aux aguets in French, like waiting for his prey to show up and jump over the prey. So what we do is to be always aware and open and attentive to jump on any subject. And also for us, the thing is that there is no specific hierarchy. There is not high and low. And what you have on your right is just a BuzzFeed series of pages. Everything is important to us. Everything might detonate ideas and concepts, and therefore we will be posting very heterogeneous material in our Facebook page. And one example of this constant oscillation between analogic and digital are these pages from the July issue of Oris. So I was approached by Oris whether it was interesting to have some reflection, somehow inspired by the COVID situation that we all lived. And my proposal was maybe to think of a few spaces of our contemporary life that might be affected or might change because of COVID. If you remember, it seems so far in the past. In March, April, a lot of articles happened in many places about the future of architecture after COVID, with a generally very banal and very bombastic declaration of the usual suspect that always have a vision for the future. Here, what I was trying to do was a little bit more humble, to say, really based on the everyday life of being confined at home, to imagine some micro changes or some mini transformation that might occur in our environment. So this series that was called Home Improvements was just a series of fragments where different parts of the house on the base of what we are living could be imagined as subject of minimal changes in the future because of what we experienced together as COVID. And it was therefore almost a translation towards the page in paper of the same attitude of mixing personal memory, some Google search, some deeper search in archive to constitute this constellation of examples. So one hypothesis is that in the future, the threshold of the house will become a place where you change clothes because you don't want to bring pollutants or virus at home. So maybe it's interesting to look back at the example of the Japanese house where you have a space where you leave your shoes. We were washing, and we still do, our hands obsessively. So maybe we will be finding sinks and wash basins distributed along the house, as it happens in Villa Savoie, that, as you might know, was commissioned by a German doctor to Le Corbusier, so you find many things. Luckily, we have a balcony, so we think that maybe it will be in the future a design of architecture, residential architecture balcons as a way to escape in case of other confinement might become important. So you have an image by Beltran Goldberg, Marina City in Chicago. Balcons, windows to look at the sky. So the image on your right is a special project in the outskirts of Milano, where you don't really see well the image, but there is a possibility to always look at the sky through a diagonal piece of glass on top of the windows, or as in the other building by Alejandro de la Sota in Spain, you can walk on the glass of the window that protrudes from the body of the building. We were making some consideration about storage, about kitchen. So this is somehow a way to say only that digital and analogic are exactly the same. It's just the output that changes from the page to the screen, but the way we navigate information and we transform that through text and image is absolutely consistent between the two things. We only follow two rules. So one rule, rule number one, is called plus, meaning that whenever we find something online that we think could become a post to be published, we try to add some further information. So we think our public service, our somehow obligation to be generous also to the public, means that it's not enough, like others do, to simply copy-paste press releases and images, but it's our responsibility to add a little bit more. It could be a small critical acknowledgement. It could be a link to another website where it's possible to get further information. It could be a parallel or a kind of like a comparison between elements that are different. So we really think it's important to have this extra element. And the second rule is that we operate in a completely non-profit mode, so we don't make $1 single from our Facebook. On the other hand, we use material without paying no one $1 single. So we'll download images from websites. We will basically operate in a sort of parasitic way. Therefore, it becomes very important to credit as many people as possible. So not just the architects, not just the writers, but also sometimes the people from where we discovered something, whether on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. The photographers, there is really an obligation somehow to multiply the acknowledgement of the different authors of culture and production around us. And just to get close to the end of this presentation, which are our obsessions that we somehow try to channel through our Facebook page. One is the idea that we need to observe of lesser known figure in architectural and cultural production. We of course recognize the value of, let's say, so-called masters, but we realize that the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century are also mobilized by a multiplicity of subjects that for many reasons have received lesser critical attention. So we like to contribute to highlighting the value of some of these researches. We're very interested in terms of the chronology of the just yesterday, therefore we still are modernist in the way that we still recognize an ideological value in many of the proposal of modernism in all its facets and geographies and localities. So we think it's important to observe of production that is still very much with us of the past 50 to 60 years. We think that by being middle-aged and in a certain way already quite established people that have occupied some position of power, we have the obligation to promote the younger. So when we say under means under 30, under 20, under 25, we need to use somehow the power that we achieved in these years to be supportive of younger producers. We love triangles, so whenever we will find a triangular architecture, we will publish about it. Don't ask us why, we simply do that. We think it is very, very important to break the narrative of modern architecture that is always everything was invented in France, Germany, and then immigrated to the US, and then the world imitated. I think that it's not true, that we need to reconstitute an idea that modernities were multiple, located in multiple places, that not always they did have the need to pass through the usual centers, that there have been dialogues and conversation occurring without the need to pass through Paris, London, or New York. And therefore, in our website and in our Facebook, we will always try to highlight these alternative ideas of modernity. We think it's very important always to keep an attention to the tools of the representation of architecture. So for us, drawings and models, unrealized project, ideas that were agitated but not necessarily brought to construction are absolutely crucial. We think that architecture is a political action, not only architecture, but especially architecture, and therefore we will always be engaged in understanding that political role, which means on one end, observing the intersection between politics and architecture, on the other hand, being very critical of certain political and cynical position of some of our colleagues, that are, even if they're trying to bring back the idea that architecture is apolitical, in fact, they're serving and operating some interests that are not ours. We don't hide the fact that our political leaning is left-wing, if not straightforwardly Marxist. Then we simply like to engage in things that are strange and odd and surprising and bizarre, like these early pictures, not photomontage, not Photoshop, actually from the 60s, of plexiglass bubbles to present high fashion set in Paris. We decided to use mostly Facebook because it's where it's still possible to have long texts. So if you compare to Twitter, that is too short, or to Instagram, where the links do not work, Facebook for us, with all the limits that we know because of Zuckerberg and the rest, is still a very useful tool because we believe in the power of text to be important for architecture. So, for instance, you have an image of a series of amazing text about the early days of quarantine. We realize a little bit retrospectively, looking at what we published, that we are somehow still attracted by a certain idea of raw architecture, you can call it brutalist, neo-brutalist, but a kind of like the raw expression of material, the simplicity of geometry, the kind of like immediacy of certain architectural language is very much often something that we look for. We are excited by other productions that occur at the edges of architecture. This is a quote from Giancarlo De Carlo, the architect. We think that when it comes to space, many other practices, visual art, cinema, dance, theater, literature have been very important. So we will always try to open up the fields to our discipline. And also we try to not be always too serious and to find some fun and to find some levity, to find some grace in the things that we do post. So far, it's already 6 years, we think that it might have worked because we are very bragging. Sometimes, not very often, we manage to have more attention, more engagement, and more results in terms of like public somehow reach than some heavyweight commercial enterprises. In the end, Fig Project is only 2 persons. It's homemade. It's done in the extra time from our other job that we have. As we say, we have not made a penny through this engagement since now, but in some moments of the year, we get more engagement than Arc Daily or Design or Design Boom that are instead real big commercial enterprises. So that, I think, would be all from the PowerPoint. I'm open for question, issues, curiosities.
Yes, great. I'm so satisfied. I mean, you are first of many, as I said, on the face, and I hope that a lot of people like you will tell us something in really up to date. I have a few questions. First is from our friend Maroje. He says hello.
Hello, Maroje.
His question is, I'm going to read it. I think we have it on, yeah. So Fig work relies on endless possibilities of harvesting digital sources and dissemination via internet channels. Yet digital sources and archives are not necessarily permanent, and there's no guarantee that they will be publicly accessible in the future. How do you see the problem of insecure, unknown future of the digital archives management, governance of digital archives? Should we still print an archive in order to preserve the present for the future? As usual, from Mara, a very long question.
Well, if we go back to that book that we were mentioning, I was mentioning of Simon Reynolds, I think that we got accustomed to think that everything should be preserved because the digital somehow make you believe that this is possible. Whereas if you go back to the pre-digital era, when any archive has been constituted, quite often many things have been eliminated before entering the archive. I mean, when it comes to the decision taken by curators or archivists about what needs to be ingested, quite often in the past, you receive an archive and then only 10% or 20% of it was actually archived, and the rest was disposed because it was not considered of value for the future. So I think, honestly, I think that we might accept with a little bit of fatalistic attitude that maybe it's okay that not everything will be archived. Maybe it's okay that some links will be broken. Maybe it's okay that some picture that you uploaded will no longer will be available, because also there's a certain value in the decay and in the disappearance of certain archival components. So I think I'm not entirely convinced that.
You mean as well as physical architecture, because we sometimes have just the drawings of some famous thing because it was destroyed in a
yeah. So there is, of course, on one hand, this, if you remember a few years ago, Google embarked in that idea of the total library. So Google wanted to scan and digitize all the books of the planet to create a book. It had various names. At some point, it was called the Gutenberg Project. So on one hand, we have a very human idea that everything needs to be preserved and conserved for posterity, for the future. But again, I think for any of us that has spent hours in a second-hand record store or in a second-hand bookstore, a lot of the production that we do is not so good for the future. So I think that we need somehow to let it go and somehow a certain quantity of what we produce and what we keep might vanish and might disappear. So I think that I think these are more active decisions that need to be taken. So the decision of what need to be preserved, what is worth investment and care, probably need to be the result of a kind of like a democratic process where the decisions are taken. But I'm not particularly believing that everything should be printed or guaranteed for eternity.
Yeah. I have a question about, you were mentioning great text about home improvements, and it's of course in this COVID period, and I really like this thing, which I think is very important. Both texts. I'm going to refer to the last issue of Oris and this new one. And you were mentioning really important things as small changes, which will probably have to be improved because of this new things that happening. But also in this latest number of Oris, you in the text over our heads and under our feet, you're mentioning, I mean, you're talking about the public space, which I think is very interesting, because you were referring to the actual situation of COVID, of quarantine and everything else. And you write beautifully about the, after restrictions and, this, which everybody calls new normal, and about the media that actually, I mean, in general, media was talking about the death of obituaries for public space. And then you write about really important, I think, also small things like in home improvements, about canopies, arcades, what you mentioned, umbrellas, and especially I like this thing about reading before going out for a walk. I think this is really important, and I mean, it's actually not so much of a question, but I want to, because a lot of people didn't read the text, just to tell something about it, because it's also like home improvements. Our public space needs to have some improvements in this situation.
Yeah, I think mine was a reaction, because when I read a few of these essays about what will be the future about COVID, so I found them a little bit too quick in jumping to a conclusion of a very ample generalization. And I think that these epidemics, like other events, actually they generate much more molecular, more minuscule adaptation as humans to reality that might probably in the future have some kind of like effects on architecture. But again, I believe more of that nature of granular intervention and slight iteration. If you watch, for instance, cinema in the past 10 years, there are a lot of these new science fiction movies where the future is no longer composed of rockets and very avant-garde-ish vision, but it's almost as if it is today. I can think of, I don't know, Black Mirror, the series, but with a few small changes that make you think that it's not really today. So you are suspending this
like a near future.
Yes, and so I think that it was, to me, again, this kind of like a pioneer. Normally, when you read this kind of like extremely avant-garde proposal of the future, is because the author hopes to get commissioned some, I don't know, study or some research by some agency. They're not very credible to me. So what I tried to do with these two articles was really to observe in the everyday mini adaptation that we are living at home. And one thing that I was surprised is, especially when I have to say that here in Canada, we never had a full quarantine like in Italy or like in China, in the sense that it was always possible to go out for a walk or to be out of home. And what we noticed in a certain way, with the weather becoming better after the very strong winter that we have here, that actually public space, parks, square streets were doing extremely well, in the sense that it was almost the only possible thing to do to distract oneself. And one realized that the fantastic possibility of public space is that you can still be quite isolated and separated in public space. I mean, also, again, I think a lot of the narrative of public space is an illusion. this idea that in public space people talk to each other all together, that we live as a collectivity. Well, I think that it's very interesting instead that public space allows to be together and separated at the same time. So in the article, I was trying to imagine what simple gestures of, how to say, kindness can we imagine for the public space to be even more generous to people. And it comes, as you say, to small details. I mean, to how the benches are placed in the space, pavement, providing shadow, providing water, providing elements that allow. I think what we really love here in Montreal is the generosity of the parks. There are not many squares. It's a North American city, so there's not the same tradition as in a medieval Mediterranean city where you have this idea of the square, the street, but it's more about parks. And parks here are extremely democratic territory where everyone feels welcome, no matter the race, social origin, age, and you have a quite amazing cohabitation of very diverse population. So I think how can you somehow, through acts of design, guarantee this cohabitation where everyone feels welcome, where there is not a dominant ideology that you need somehow to embrace. You can literally, we see that every time we go to a park, you can have a Orthodox Jewish family, and then 5 meters from there, a group of teenagers smoking marijuana, and then 5 meters from there, it's a Muslim family having a barbecue, and then you have old people. So you really have this kind of like complexity for all the differences. And what to me is fascinating is how can you guarantee this diversity? And I think architecture and design have a lot to do with acts of which plants will you put, what will be paved and what will not be paved, and also this idea that maybe you should overdo it. Maybe you this idea that the public space has to be minimal and controlled. No, actually, it has to be extremely generous. And I think that there are many projects that we've seen in the past years that start to do that. I can think of the Skanderbeg Square in Tirana by 54 NIE, the Belgian architect. This idea that public space has this amazing capacity to absorb diversity.
Yeah, great. I mean, those questions, actually, also you being professor, I think it's a fantastic task for new students also, and your work is something which is really interesting to show people that you know, architecture is not just brick and mortar. That's I think really important. It's probably sometimes we talk this we are talking about. You know, 69 and those public things which are happening again and so on. But those things that you're mentioning are so important for the actually academic also to teach students that that's not always a brick and mortar. I think. I mean,
what we have to do is, I mean, we really believe that architecture is a form of knowledge, and is Umberto Eco used to say is the last humanist project, because I mean any architecture, built or not built, is always the convergence of so many different interests and actors. I mean, if you think of any project, you have to talk with the clients, you have to convince the municipality, you have to negotiate with different budgets, and then you have to engage with experts and consultants. So it's really a collective endeavor of multiple agents. So for Umberto Eco, he was writing that in the 60s. This is a humanist project because it's really a place where you can read society, a fragment of society, through all these intersecting elements. So for us, architecture as still, we're very optimistic, no? This amazing possibility to be operating at that level. And we think that in order to be relevant, we have to mobilize, again, as you say, not just brick and mortar, but also ideas and concepts and things that are somehow tangent to architecture.
Yeah, narratives. Maybe for the end, what are you doing next? What's something which actually your new obsession or new book, or I mean, you mentioned some projects, but let's just.
One project that we've been trying to, again, one of these unrealized projects that you can find on our website that we are trying really to mobilize is this idea to work on labor. So that they know that one of the things that somehow characterizes us as human is the fact that we work, whether for ourselves or exploited or in any system that you can possibly imagine. And I think that we are very interested to do better understand how architecture makes people work. I mean, how architectural projects organize labor. how the act itself of architecture is organized. So what are the labor relations in an architecture studio on the construction site? I mean, what are all the issues of labor that are somehow inherent to architectural production? And so this is really a field that we'd like to explore in the future. So we tried with a few somehow incursion to do that, but we really have the ambition to be bringing that to something a little bit more ambitious and large.
Yeah, great. I mean, you're tackling important questions. Well, thank you really much. I mean, you're talking? No, okay. You are tackling important questions, and thank you for accepting this first lecture series and talks. And I really hope to see you here live. Hopefully,
we hope to. I mean, I should be in France beginning of next year, and then we will see.
Yeah.
There's another question that showed up on the chat. Have you seen
it? Yeah, really? Yes, Krešimir Damjanovic, great architect, is asking, increasingly in today's times of the pandemic, your approach to creating a digital archive is more current than ever before, essentially is contributing to the topic of collective knowledge. I wonder what your image selection process is when you decide to publish an image. Is it carefully focused on current topic or you are talking about, or do you have a different, more intuitive approach?
We would say that it's probably the second, in the sense that it's more intuitive. Yeah, in the sense that I would say that literally about the image itself, it's probably rather some kind of quality that we identify in the image or images. So that somehow resonates with some of our interests. So let's say if we go back to the recent post of the last couple of weeks, you will find it's always a combination of buildings from as we say, recent yesterday. So figures that are lesser known of architects, 50, 60, 70, or some production from our colleagues from now. And normally what we try, I would say that it's probably the sensation that the spatiality that is somehow channeled through the image has been somewhat conceived as a kind of like a moment of innovation, and not innovation in the stupid sense of this kind of like creativity and innovation slogan that you read so often, but rather when you detect that the architects have been trying to slightly modify the way with which spaces are used or lived. And that can happen from a private home to a kind of like a collective building. So we don't, I mean, even if we value the idea of the collective and the public, we often publish things that are private, because it's normally when we feel that there has been an attempt to somehow challenge or question the convention of architectural production. Yeah. But I would say that it's rather intuitive than normally. We would say that we try to build a narrative out of the material that we find or that were suggested, rather than having an idea, okay, today we should publish a post about that topic, let's go out and try to find material that corroborates a point. It's normally, it's true that it's more from the visual that then we start to construct a narrative.
Yes, thank you for your post, thank you for your text, thank you for this lecture, and I hope to see you in Croatia and in Zagreb.
Fantastic. No, I miss Croatia a lot. It's a long time we haven't been there.
Okay, so thank you again, and hope to see you next time, and probably very soon.
Super. Yeah. Thanks. And follow us on. That sounds like follow us on Facebook.
Facebook. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.